Hello, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're looking at trains! Isn't that so exciting? Trains are so awesome! No, they're not exciting or awesome at all. So, actually, why am I reviewing a game called Trains? If you looked at all my other reviews, you know that I love trashy, fantasy-themed, science fiction-themed games. But, if you also looked at my other videos, you know that I listed Trains as one of my top 10 games to look out for at Gen Con, and one of the ones I was most excited about. The reason for that is because this is a deck building game. I love deck building games, and this had a lot of buzz around it because it did a lot of things differently than other deck builders. It used a board, it had a lot of area control, which I also like, and the one thing that was holding this game back was that people said the original version, which is by, Hisashi Hayashi, I just knew I would butcher that name, was a very well-playing game mechanically, but that it looked awful, just bad components, bland looking, no theme whatsoever. So AEG picked it up, and AEG has good production values on all their games, and they rethemed it all, made it look really nice, and so people had a lot better expectations for it. So it got me excited, even though I really have no interest in Euro-style games about trains and trains in general. But I came to it with an open mind. I was pretty excited about it. I got a copy in my hands this week. I was able to play it, and, well, it's still about trains. But did it play well enough for me to forget about all that? Well, let's take a look at the game, and then we'll come back. And as always, I'll tell you what I think. Trains is a deck building game, and if you've played other deck building games, you know what to expect. You're basically going to start with a specific set of starting cards and use those to purchase better cards that you put into your deck to strengthen it, with the eventual goal of trying to gain points. Whoever has the most points at the end of the game is the winner. Now everyone's going to choose a color at the beginning of the game, and you're going to take that color assortment of cubes. These cubes represent rails that you're going to build out on the map. Unlike many deck builders, there is a board in this game, and it is very important to gameplay. There is a Tokyo side and an Osaka side. We're going to use the Tokyo side for this example, and we'll get back to that in a minute, and I'll explain what everything does. Now, in your starting deck, you have 10 cards, and there's 3 different kinds. You have normal, train. Now, up in the top corner, the yellow symbol is currency. Anytime you play a card that actually has a number up in this corner, it could be 1, 2, 3, then you're actually going to gain that much currency to use on your turn. The number in red on the other side is how much this card would cost to buy from the supply. And this card has no special effect, and you see that this symbol means it's a train card. There are different types of cards, however. So the Lay Rails card gives you no currency and would cost you 3 to buy. However, it has a special effect. You can actually use this to lay a rail, and remember that the rails are the cubes that each player has. At the same time that you build a rail, however, this symbol means that you're going to have to take a waste into your deck. The station expansion functions the same way as Relay Rails, no currency and a special effect, but this one allows you to build a station. And I'll get back to that in a moment. Now, what are waste cards? Waste cards are always available. You can never purchase them, but you wouldn't want to. Other cards, like the Lay Rails and Station expansion that I showed you, are going to force you to take waste into your deck. Just like the other cards that you actually purchased, waste is going to be shuffled back into your deck and drawn on your turn. However, these do nothing. All they do is clog up your deck and keep you from getting the good cards that you want. So you don't want waste cards, but you may be forced to take waste cards. It is worth noting, however, that on your turn, you can choose to skip your entire turn to return every waste card that's currently in your hand back to the supply. But it does not function on any of the waste cards that are in your discard or in your actual deck. Now, in addition to your starting hand, there are going to be 7 other cards besides waste that every game starts off with and that are available to purchase. Some of them are just like the Express Train, which is basically a better version of the normal train. Instead of 1 currency, you get 2. You also can buy more Lay Rails and more station expansions. 3 different cards, the Apartment, the Tower, and the Skyscraper, don't have any actual effect on gameplay other than you're actually going to be forced to take a waste just to buy them. However, at the end of the game, they are worth victory points. That's what the star symbol represents down in the corner that no other cards have. So at the end of the game, if this card, the Tower, is in your deck, you're going to get 2 victory points. It's not usually good to buy these early on because just like trash cards, or waste cards, excuse me, they're just going to clog up your deck since they have no other special effect. but near the end of the game, they're good to purchase just for points. In addition to those cards that are always available in every game of trains, you're going to use the stack of randomizers that AEG includes in the game. Each randomizer card represents a different type of card that you could be added to the supply. You're always going to randomly deal out 8 at the beginning of the game, and then take the corresponding stack of cards for all 8 of those. And so I just set out a random assortment of 8 cards here, and they all do different things. Therefore, every game of trains should be different. So just as a few examples, one of the cards I drew randomly is the Garage, which gives you 1 currency and is an action card. That's what this red symbol means. It also costs you 3 to buy. Now, when you play this card on your turn, you get to draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards from your hand. So it's a good way to get new cards into your hand and get rid of ones that you don't really need. Then there's also cards like the Early Train, which is a different kind of train that actually has a special ability. It gives you 2 currency, which is pretty good, and it has an action. This one says that you may place cards you buy this turn on top of your deck. The time symbol means that the effect is sort of continuous for your turn, and this one costs 5 to buy. So those are just some examples. Now, what are you actually going to do with these cards? Well, like I said earlier, you're trying to use cubes to actually lay rails down on the map. When you lay a rail using a lay rail card, or there are some other cards that will let you do it like the tunnel, you're actually going to take your cube and put it on the map, and depending on where it goes, it may or may not cost you extra currency from the cards that you're playing. If you just play it on one of the light green spaces, these are fields, and therefore it costs you nothing other than playing the lay rails card or whatever it is, and perhaps taking a waste into your deck. But if you try to build on one of these gray, red, or orange spaces, these are cities. Now, it costs you 1 extra currency just to place a cube in a city. And remember, when I say currency, I mean the cards in your hand that actually give you currency up in the top corner. So as long as I have at least 1 currency from a card that I played in this turn, I can place a cube in a city, no problem. Now, if I try to build on a river, that also costs me an extra currency as well, because it's hard to build a train track on a river. The dark green spaces are actually mountains, and those will cost me an extra 2 currency, which is even worse. Now, the other thing about cities is that when any player actually has a cube there, on their turn, they can use cards like the station expansion to actually build a station there. Stations are these little white cylinders. The number of stations that can be on a city depends on what the image says. So for the gray ones like Kichijoji, you can only build 1 station because that's all it shows there. But for the red ones like Kawagoe, you can build 2 stations. And for the orange ones, of which there's only 2 on this map, you can actually build 3 stations. Now, what do the stations actually do? At the end of the game, if you have a rail in a city that has stations, you're going to get bonus points. If there's only 1 station there, you're just going to get 2 points. If you're in a city that has 2 stations at the end of the game, you're going to get 4 bonus points. And if you're actually in a city that has 3 that are actually built, you're going to get 8 bonus points. And remember that any player can build stations there as long as they have a cube there. So players can actually share the victory points if everyone's got their cube there. But actually putting your cube there after someone's built stations can be a costly maneuver. In addition to the extra 1 that you have to pay for going into a city, there are other mitigating factors. If other players already have their rails there, their little cubes, and you try to build there, it's going to cost you 1 extra currency for every other player's cube that's there. So in a 4-player game, if 3 other people beat you there, it's going to cost you 3 currency just for the amount of cubes there, plus the additional 1 just for building into a city. And the other penalty for building where there already are other players' rails is taking another waste into your deck. In addition to that, for every station that's already built there, that's an additional 1 cost. So it can be very costly to go into a city where other people have already set up camp, and therefore you kind of want to spread out on your own at the beginning of the game. And sure enough, at the beginning of the game, everyone's going to start from a different area of their choosing. So it could be good to stake your claim somewhere where no one else is. In addition, there are some other spaces out. These faraway spaces on the board that just have stars on them. Now remember, I said the stars usually represent points, and it's the same thing here. If you have a cube on one of these points at the end of the game, you score that many bonus points then. In order to actually build there, however, you have to start off adjacent on your turn, just like normal, building your rails out. So let's say that I was building this way. And when I actually get to that spot, when I want to put my next rail there, I have to actually have that much currency. So in this case, it would be 4. If I have 4 currency, I could put a cube there. It doesn't do anything else for me now, but at the end of the game, I get that many points. 4 here, 3 here, 2 there, and so on. Now, but again, other players can go there too, and if they're already there, I have to spend the extra currency and take the waste. But we'll both get the points. Now, the game eventually is going to end, and the winner at the end is whoever has the most points. The game ends in 3 different ways. First off, if any 4 stacks of cards from the supply, excluding the waste, run out, the game immediately ends. So if people are just buying more and more of the same cards, the game can end early that way. If the supply of stations ever runs out, the game ends immediately at the end of the current player's turn. And if any player runs out of rails on their turn, they'll take the rest of their turn and the game immediately ends. Then you're going to score points. Everyone at the beginning starts with a cube here, and you'll just basically go around the map seeing who gets what points. If anyone's here on the star points, they're going to get those bonus points. You'll go around and see who has a cube on a city with stations, and they'll gain the appropriate amount of points. And remember that there are cards you can purchase that will give you more points at the end of the game. And that's basically how you play trains. You're going to be taking and buying better cards, trying to take as little waste as possible, and just trying to efficiently build out your rails and your stations. One thing I should also mention is that if you take too much waste into your deck, you can actually skip your entire turn just to get rid of every waste that's in your hand. But you can only get rid of the waste that's in your hand. You put it back into the supply. You can't do anything about the ones that are in your discard pile or your deck. And that's trains. Well, I really love trains. And maybe I killed some of the suspense earlier when I told you that I really love deck builders, but you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that I was going to like a game. I've played a lot of different deck builders and some of them were not great. This is a great game. And a lot of that has to do with that board. Now, if it was only a matter of the cards themselves, this is one of the most direct ports of Dominion that I've ever played. You know, every game is a sort of a clone of Dominion in some way, shape, or form because that game started the genre, but a lot of other games really change it up by, like, Ascension and the DC Comics deck builder change up the formula a lot by having that starting lineup that constantly changes, and they add different types of currency and stuff like that. Whereas in this game, it really is just currency, buying cards, taking actions, and you have a starting allotment of cards, and then just some ones that you randomly choose out without them really changing. And again, the game can end when you run out of those cards. So that's very, very similar to Dominion. But that board and the idea of you building rails and building stations and going out to different places and trying to get to a spot before your opponents do, that really makes a difference. And even though I don't like the train theme, and I think that many games like this, the theme is not that strong, and to be sure, the theme isn't that strong in this game, but having that board and having the ability to do those things, I really did feel like I was in this mad dash to make my train tracks and to do what I wanted to do before my opponents could cut me off. And that's really a cool feeling. And when you add that together with the deck building aspects that you're using to fuel those actions, it just felt really cool. It was really fast. The game felt tighter than it was in the games that I played, but it was still very exciting. I really enjoyed it. The production quality is stellar. I really like all the components and the art on the cards, which looks sort of like that photorealistic stuff. I'm not really used to that. Usually companies, when they get new art, will just go for the most sort of dramatic, colorful, cartoony look, which I obviously like a lot. But still, this was a nice change of pace, and I liked it quite a bit. Some of the cards in the random assortment that you can get are definitely more powerful than others. One of the games we played actually had an assortment that was not really all that useful. Didn't lead to a very exciting gameplay in and of itself, but there are other cards that can get the waste out of your deck faster, and like the landfill card that's really cool, and some people could say that's overpowered, but that's part of the fun of the game too, is that every game of trains is going to be different because you have this different assortment of cards out in the supply. Now, I should mention that even though I think that this is a better deck builder than a lot of other deck builders I've played, it's the same core mechanic. So there are some people that I know who do not like that mechanic, that because of the luck of the draw, literally, that you having bad hands while other players just do these boom, boom, boom combos on their turn, can be a big turnoff. It's not nearly as strategic as some people would like it to be. However, there is strategy here. I mean, you have to make some tough choices of what am I going to put into my deck? Am I going to keep this hand of waste for now because I have a couple of cards that are useful, or am I going to just waste my whole turn to dump it, hoping that I have future turns that are better? And what about taking waste into my hand? Is it worth building this rail here right now when the situation isn't optimal just to get some points, but having to take 3 waste into my hand? Because it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, the more waste you put into your deck, the harder it's going to be later for you. But those are the kind of hard choices and strategies you have to decide upon. So this isn't going to change anyone's mind about the deck building genre or about the train genre, although, you know, I'm more open to it now. But really what I love about this game is the mechanics. I love the idea of taking these deck building aspects and using it in a creative way that other games haven't. And I think that's kind of the future of deck building, to be honest, of games implementing it in a better fashion, using a board, using the whole allotment of, and turning it from less of just a card game like Dominion was and more into a board game, you know, splitting that difference. So I really like this game. I think that it's got a lot of depth to it. I think that it's got a lot of legs. I don't know what they'll do for expansions because it seems like they've really run the gamut of every type of train card, although I guess they'll probably have different boards. But I highly recommend it if you like deck builders, trains, or any fusion of those two. So my name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Buy train if you have to.